Webtoons are an amazing medium. For the first time, a kid from the Philippines, Malaysia, or South Africa could pick up his graphical tablet and draw comics that could be read by anyone in the world. And that same kid could see the universe he created have life breathed into it by becoming an anime, a privilege only a select few known Japanese ever got to enjoy. In this video, I will be talking about the history of the two mediums, the path they took, and how they evolved. Then I will compare their strengths and weaknesses, before giving my final thoughts about which style I believe to be the superior one. While the term manga dates back to the 12th century, it's only in the 1800s that it was popularized. And even then, the shape it took was much different from its modern connotation. At that point in time, it was thought of as a picture book. It was not until the coming of Kitazawa Rakuten that mangas took their modern definition, with his comics published on the Jiji Shimpo and Tokyo Puck magazines. Of course, as you can see in the images, the style of drawing isn't what a normal person associates with anime. It's more reminiscent of traditional Japanese art. This would all change after World War II with the coming of a certain cyborg child trying to fill the void in his father's heart. Of course, I'm talking about Astro Boy. The impact and legacy of Osamu Tezuka cannot be overstated, and if given the choice, I would spend an hour just talking about achievements and his effects on the manga and anime industry. Fortunately for both you and me, this video isn't about him. In the 1950s and 60s, much of what we consider manga style would be developed. The big eyes, the realistic body proportions, the paneling, and overall, all the hallmarks of manga iconography would be set in this time period. Later on, in the 80s and 90s, we would see another evolution, with the coming of mangas like Fist of the North Star, Dragon Ball, or Sailor Moon, that would push that art style to its extremes, and really define what we consider to be typical manga style today. I remember when I was first introduced to the concept of manga, after my 100th anime binge, and being exalted at the idea of continuing these stories that I watched in anime form. But then I would go and check it out, only to be taken back by the fact it was drawn in black and white. This might seem weird or trivial to those of you who grew up on mangas, but for me, as someone who came and was used to a world filled with bright colors, the black and white style felt very suffocating. It was only later that I was able to cross over that barrier and grow to love the medium and its potential. One of the most appealing aspects of mangas, for me, when I first started, was the diversity of genres. As a long-time big fan of horror, both psychological and graphical, I was blown away by artists like Junji Ito, Hitoshi Iwaki, or Naoki Urasawa, who had shown me an aspect of mangas I never knew existed. And what is said about horror can be applied to all other genres. If you want your standard battle shonen, you got them. If you want some shoujo romance, you got that. If realistic depiction of romance is more your alley, then you might want to try this neat genre called josei. Overall, you get the idea. The manga industry has had such a long time to grow that you could find a decent volume of stories from any genre of fiction that you might want to try. For me, the greatest aspects of a print-based industry is that only the best of the best get to be published. If your art is subpar, or if your story isn't interesting enough, chances are the publisher wouldn't even spare a glance at you. It's an investment. Nobody in their right mind would fund a project that would not sell. And this is one area where mangas have a clear advantage over webtoons. The fact that all stories are curated means that you don't need to browse through an ocean of mediocre works to find the hidden gems. And this is where mangas really shine. Due to the longevity of the industry, ways of creatively using the panels to serve the story have been developed and passed down from generation to the next. Clever usage of page turning, characters that transcend panels, two-page sceneries that awe you with their beauty. These are but a fraction of the wisdom mangakas have accumulated throughout the years. The fact that they are not stuck to a purely vertical paneling system allows the artists to control the flow of their comics however they want, deciding to be gentle or harsh depending on the context. It's a well-trodden path that allows for high flexibility. And those are what I consider to be the strengths of mangas. Now, let's go back and look at webtoons and see all the historical parallels, its evolution, and why I believe them to be the future of comics, at least Eastern ones. The term webtoon is fairly new in historical terms. It was only in 2004 that Naver launched its webtoon project in Korea, opening with it a world of digital comics. But while webtoon might be new, its ancestor manhwa is anything but that. During the 1920s, Korea was under Japanese colonization. Under their rule, Japanese culture seeped its roots within the Korean peninsula. Such an exchange gave rise to multiple cultural progenies, most relevant of which to this video was a neat new thing that the Korean people got to enjoy: manhwas. First applied to Japanese cartoons imported from the mainland, the term only took its modern definition by the late 40s, where popular manhwaga Kim Yon-hwan, more commonly known as Gita Koji, started the first Korean comic magazine, Manhwa Heijin. Both Koji and his magazine would push social commentary and social reform through their comics, until it was shut down later down the road by the authorities. By the advent of the 1950s, the world of manhwa has developed enough to host a variety of genres, most prominent of which were the Sunjun, which roughly translates to shoujo mangas. However, the hallmarks of the genre that make it so distinguishable wouldn't appear until the late 50s, where the legendary Japanese mangaka Tezuka Osamu would publish Princess Knight. This piece of fiction would become the founding father of shoujo back in the land of the rising sun, and would cement it as a serious genre. This shift in perspective would affect the trajectory of Sunjung in Korea, where the manhwagas would imitate Tezuka's drawing style. This imitation wouldn't be made more apparent than in Kwon Yoon-suk's works Bonseon and Baduk and Sour of Happiness. As the manhwa industry experienced a massive boom in the 80s and early 90s, the government would unfortunately crack down on it due to what they call harmful influences. However, even with magazines and publication houses shutting down left and right, there was still a massive hunger, a rabid fanbase waiting for the right person to quench their thirst. Enter Dome and Naver. Many of the new generation of fans would not know about Dome, but it was actually the first company to publish manhwas online. They would even be the first to coin the term in 2003, with the release of their website. Naver's spin on the concept would come a year later, and would become a household name that is synonymous with the word webtoon. At first, both websites would only serve to upload scans of physical manhwa copies. And while the legality of such action is dubious at best, this period fortunately didn't last long, with the advent of the first generation. By the mid to late 2006, webtoon started to shift to more original works. The webtoon style evolved as time went on, from cartoonish, mostly gag comic inspired in the late 2000s, to a more cool, edgy, with characters reminiscent of K-pop stars in the early 10s. It was at this point that comics that would define a generation would be born, such as Noblesse, Black Haze, or God of High School. By the late 10s to today, manhwas and webtoons are the talk of the town, with works such as Tower of God and Solo Leveling having millions, if not tens of millions of fans worldwide. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago when I was first introduced to the concept of webtoons. I was on a shonen battle fantasy binge when I found what I presumed to be a cool looking manga with some of the most stylish art I have ever seen, The Breaker's New Wave. It was not until later, when I realized that the names of the characters were not constructed like those I was used to, that I understood that what I was reading wasn't a Japanese manga, but a Korean manhwa. And once that realization settled in, it was like I went back in time to the first day I understood that there were animes and mangas other than Dragon Ball Z and Naruto. A whole new world that I could immerse myself into opened to me, and I couldn't wait to dive right in. When I first started reading webtoons and manhwas, one of the first things I noticed to be different from mangas, other than character names, was the art. It was so unique, so different from what my weeb eyes were used to, that I couldn't help but be enchanted by them. The only manga my mind could link this art style to, in any shape or form, was Bleach. They had that same cool, mysterious, borderline edgy vibe, and I was all for that. But then, after looking back at Bleach and comparing it to mangas like Nobles, Solo Leveling or Maze, there was still a very noticeable difference. The way the hair flows and the eyes are drawn was something I hadn't seen before. That was until I remembered what K-pop idols looked like. Now, I don't have any conclusive evidence or major source to back the claim that manhwa characters are inspired of K-pop artists, but it's hard to not notice the similarities. The effeminate look, the snow-white skin, the heavy eye makeup, the rainbow-colored hair. Is all of that a coincidence? I find it hard to believe. It's no secret that most manga fans read them through illegal means. You only need to look at the kind of numbers websites like Manganello bring to understand the fact. However, even for the segments of the fanbase, the fact that the comics on Webtoon are in majority free is still a non-negligible upside. At least while reading on it, you don't run the risk of having your computer being bombarded with malwares. As for the fans who do buy their mangas from Bookwalker or Amazon, they can still feel like they're supporting their favorite artists without having to spend crazy amounts of money. Just reading and commenting on the chapters is more than enough for the authors who want to get popular and then potentially get picked up by Webtoon and turn their hobby into a career. For this segment, I think a little story is due. Ever since we were young, my sister was never that into otaku culture. She did watch her Naruto, her One Piece, her Fairy Tail, but she never really dabbled in the world of mangas. And it was not until a couple of months ago that I found her reading something. I was taken aback, as my sister rarely ever reads unless she was forced to, so I wanted to check what kind of story made her change her mind. Lo and behold, it was Solo Leveling. You could not imagine my surprise at that moment. My sister who never ever touched a manga, my sister whose most niche anime, and I'm using the word niche very loosely here, she ever touched was Hunter x Hunter. That same sister was reading something so far away from the mainstream as Solo Leveling? After I asked her later about her sudden change of heart, she told me that the reason why she found it so easy to immerse herself in Solo Leveling was because of the colors. It was much easier for her eyes that are used to watching manga to read webtoons than it was to read normal black and white mangas. And she wasn't alone in her feelings either. Even I, a seasoned otaku weeb who read countless mangas, find it easier to read webtoons. And one part of that is the vibrant colors that give life to the world. But another equally as important part was the paneling. In an age that is increasingly digital, the way manga puns are structured just does not work. While I do acknowledge its power in the print medium and the way master mangakas can craft stories that are specific to it, I stop right there. It's only in print where such structure works. I cannot count how many times I had to zoom in on certain panels while reading mangas on my phone or PC because the dialogue was too small or the art wasn't clear. And then there is the elephant in the room, the panel flow. While some master mangakas can create a needful flow that isn't lost even when the pages are scanned and viewed on a digital medium, we need to understand that not every art is a master, and it's ridiculous to expect it to be so. So many times have I skipped entire pages from mangas I've read and loved because I couldn't understand where I had to look. Where should my eyes start and where should they rest? In webtoon format, it's almost impossible to screw it up. Yes, there is less creative freedom, but there is also less room to mess things up. Plus, the vertical format is perfect for scrolling devices like phones and PCs. Both mangas and webtoons have evolved far past what their founding father thought they could be, and inspired a generation of artists and readers alike to create and experience new worlds that are far more emotionally rich and interesting than our boring, dull real world. But even though I acknowledge its shortcomings, I do believe that webtoons are the future. I just have much more faith in companies from Korea or startups in the West or anywhere in the world. I believe that they can push this medium forward and let it blossom into a flower more beautiful than anything we can imagine. And while Japanese mangas have been leading this medium, and will continue to lead for years, if not decades to come, I do not think that there will be any innovation from them. And that is not just because of their conservative way of thinking, though it does not help their case. Their problem is much deeper. Believe me, I've been there. While I was in Japan, I talked with many scholars, and almost all of them lament the current state of the industry. It is an oligopoly. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, it's when a select few companies control the whole market. Think AT&T and Comcast for those of you who live in the US. If you don't, just think about your telecom provider, as it's basically the case everywhere. And the problem with oligopolies is that they stifle competition. They make it extremely hard for any new startup company to come and provide a better product, either through legal means, aka lawsuits, or by raising the floor to compete, making it almost impossible for anyone new to come in and take a part of that sweet market share. This is why I'm so hopeful in regards to Webtoon. Not because I think that their parent company, Naver, is some sort of angel or anything, but because they're the first competitor to the big Japanese publishers we have seen in many decades. They've paved the way for online comic publishing and set practices that may define the next generation.